Hello, everyone. I'm Teresa O'Neill, Vice President of Global Strategic Partnerships at Travel Oregon. Thank you for taking the time to join us today for this Oregon Tourism Engagement Session. Tourism is about place and experience. So as we begin, it's important to take a moment to acknowledge the more than 60 tribes and bands of Indigenous peoples that have lived in the Northwest region since time immemorial. We're grateful for the land itself, for those who have stewarded it for generations and continue to do so today, and for the opportunity to study, learn, work, and be in community on this land. I'll also note some meeting tools and our best practice meeting practices. One tool we're utilizing today is the use of closed captioning. This is an important tool in supporting improved meeting accessibility and aligns with both statewide and Travel Oregon's diversity, equity, and inclusion efforts. Should you prefer, you may turn the feature off using the closed captioning button located in the Zoom controls at the bottom of the screen. Please reach out to our technical host if you're experiencing any difficulties or need technical assistance during the meeting. Use the chat feature and send a chat directly to the technical host so they can assist you. Should you have any questions about the meeting topics or process, please send a chat directly to Kate Sapel on the Travel Oregon team. Additionally, in support of an inclusive Additionally, in support of an inclusive and collaborative process that invites us all to join in, we ask that you please keep yourself muted unless speaking, participate by being fully present and engaged. If you need to step away or take a break, do so. Respect the process and respect other people, the unique experiences, perspectives, and value others bring. Respect our time and be collaborative by keeping it brief and focused on the current topic. Create space for others to be heard, speak from our own experiences, and use I statements. I'd like to thank you all again for taking the time to join us today and acknowledge the challenges you, our tourism industry partners, have experienced firsthand from the pandemic over the past year. As we all know, the tourism industry has been greatly impacted, more so than many other economic sectors. The recent National Jobs Report found that 4 in 10 jobs lost nationwide are in leisure and hospitality sector. And the travel industry has suffered a $500 billion loss in visitor spending. In Oregon, this is translated to visitor spending 58% less in 2020 than in 2019, which has resulted in a 24% drop, or 28,500 fewer tourism-related jobs statewide in just 1 year. As we turn the page to 2021 with its promise of a vaccine and hope for recovery, we also acknowledge that this year will continue to bring challenges to the industry. Although we operate in this highly fluid and uncertain economic climate, we must set strategies and goals for the future. First, targeting the immediate rebuild, as well as long-range vision for the future of Oregon's tourism industry and economy. Today's meeting is intended as a start at doing just that. First, you'll be hearing from Nastasia Olson, Project Manager of Strategy, who will be taking some time to walk you through Travel Oregon's strategic planning efforts. She will share some statewide results from the 2020 stakeholder survey and ask you a series of polling questions, ensuring we're continuing to focus on responding to your greatest needs. This information will be used to help Travel Oregon make strategic and programmatic funding decisions. Next, we will shift the focus of the meeting to the Mount Hood and Columbia River Gorge regional conversation. Harry Dalgard, Director of the Regional Cooperative Tourism Program, will share an overview of the program and the regional strategic planning process. From there, our regional partner, Lizzie Keaton, will be joining us presenting the Mount Hood and Columbia River Gorge regions plan for the 21-23 strategic planning, and will facilitate a breakout group discussion so you all can provide feedback. Your time here today will help shape the tourism strategies and funding decisions for your region. With that, I'm pleased to introduce Nastasia. Thank you all again. Staj, please take it away.
Great, thank you, Teresa. And again, I'm Nastasia Olson, Travel Oregon's Strategy Project Manager. So as we launch into the process to develop Travel Oregon's 4-year strategic plan, to guide us through rebuilding Oregon's economy, I'm pleased to share a little bit about the approach before I dive into asking you some of the polling questions. So as Teresa mentioned, while we begin to see the dire impacts of COVID lighten on the tourism industry, we also continue to operate in a highly fluid and uncertain economic climate. To be responsive and intentional in this environment, we will be undertaking organs strategic planning through a two-phased approach. What this means is we will be launching a short-term rebuild plan this spring, serving as a catalyst from COVID crisis to an emphasis on short-term rebuilding, focusing on repair and investing in key opportunities to restore tourism. And as we shift from the crisis strategies we've really been working on this past year into these rebuild strategies moving ahead, we must also continue to recognize the magnitude of what the tourism industry and all of you have experienced these past 12 months. Born out of these challenges is the opportunity for growth and the responsibility to re-examine the role of tourism in the future of Oregon's economy. We're seeing visitors shift their behaviors, some of which may become permanent. We're also seeing the impacts of climate change with more extreme weather patterns and longer and more intense wildfire seasons. And we have the long overdue need to put conversations and policies against racial injustice at the forefront of our decisions. All of this is paramount, and that while we rebuild, we must also rethink. So while reimagining the future, which already seems so uncertain, may sound completely intimidating, it's also an exciting and necessary opportunity for regrowth and transformation, ensuring our industry does not return to business as usual, but rather emerges more resilient and an even more relevant economic driver for our state. This two-phased approach will allow us the chance to set a longer range vision. It will allow us to extend the rebuild plan into a transformational one through the year 2025. And it will allow us more time for meaningful industry engagement with all of you and to ensure that our work is integrated through an equity lens. With this in mind, I do want to take a quick poll from this group to assess the alignment for this planning process. So here shortly, you will see some polls popping up where you can agree or disagree with the following statements, and make sure to press submit so that we can get those results. And just note that these polls are anonymous, but we will be recording the results. And so here we go with the first poll. So again, you can choose whether you agree or disagree with the following statement, and we will leave this open for about a minute. Looks like we have strong agreement with a few people disagreeing, but this is great. Thank you for your feedback. And so with this second poll, again, we'll be just getting quick feedback here from you all. So Oregon Governor Brown has proclaimed it is the duty of every state agency to apply the Oregon Equity Framework to develop agency-specific strategies and concrete actions to address racial and economic disparities. Travel Oregon is a state economic development agency. As such, it should play a role in advancing economic equity for Oregonians. Do you agree or disagree with this statement? You can see we've got very strong agreement in your region for the equity work. So thank you very much for that perspective. So I will be doing some more polling here shortly, but before that, I wanted to share a timeline of where we are at in this two-phase planning approach. So I want to point out that after these engagement sessions that you're in today, we're doing a series of these all in every region. We will be opening the draft Travel Oregon Rebuild Strategic Plan for public comment in April. And then we will be doing a public hearing on the draft plan in May at the Oregon Tourism Commission meeting. And then following the adoption of the rebuild plan at the June Commission meeting, we will really be kicking off the second phase of the planning at the Governor's Conference on Tourism in June. So I hope you will all be attending that. And then following the conference, there will be additional chances for stakeholder input into the fall of this year, including one-on-one interviews, focus groups, co-creation labs, and an equity assessment. These opportunities are vital to ensure we continue to hear from you and that your voices are heard and responded to. We will communicate these events via our industry e-newsletter, as we always do. And if you have any specific interest in this process or questions, you can always reach out to me directly. That's my email there. Okay, so jumping back to the timeline for a moment, you can see that the stakeholder survey that we did in late October last year really serves as the kickoff and a key foundation to this whole year-long planning effort that we undergo, as well as the regional plans that you'll be hearing from a little later. So I'm hopeful that you all were able to take part in this survey. Again, it's really important to all of our planning efforts. We had over 1,200 people across the state complete it. And so today, I want to confirm some of the top priorities and destination management challenges and needs that we heard in the survey and see if they're still accurate from your perspective. So I'll be sharing some of those results, and then again, we'll be doing the corresponding polling to reconfirm if those are accurate. So note, with the polls coming up here shortly, there will be an other option on several of them. So if you feel the need, we would love to hear your perspectives, and actually we'll be capturing that in the chat feature. So when you see that other option, and if you choose that, again, please feel free to put that in the chat. Okay, so here we go. Here you can see with this survey, specifically for your region, some of the top concerns for welcoming visitors to your community included diminished visitor experience due to facility and amenity closures, overburdened public resources such as bathrooms and parking, and negative resident sentiments towards visitors. So with this poll here, you can, in thinking about the next 6 months, are your top concerns about welcoming visitors to your community the same? Can you please choose your top 3 biggest concerns and press submit? Okay, so it looks like overburdened public resources. So bathrooms, parking, parks, public spaces is really the top concern still for your region, as well as some other big areas. So thank you for that. Okay. And so on this slide, you can see that as a result of COVID, the statewide priorities, resources and programs identified specifically to assist businesses and organizations in rebuilding in the next 6 months included helping advocate for effective policies and funding to support tourism businesses and organizations, tools and trainings to improve business communications and marketing, networking with other professionals in your sector, support transitioning online, technical assistance, navigating funding and loans, and so on. So again, here with this poll, please select the 3 options that you believe are the top priority resources specifically to assist your business and organization in your community in rebuilding. So helping advocate for effective policies is still the highest priority, as well as tools and training. So again, helpful to know and reconfirm that. Okay, great. So on this next slide, you can see here that the top statewide priority resources and programs to assist communities in rebuilding in the next 6 months included supporting, developing, and bolstering visitor experiences that are COVID appropriate and enhance the local livability. Communication tools and network message frameworks to convey safe visitor behavior in towns and businesses. Land stewardship strategies and processes to help ensure outdoor recreation experiences are kept pristine. And so on. And so again, with this poll, as we've done in the past, please choose the 3 statements that you believe are the top priority resources and or programs to assist your community in rebuilding. So land stewardship popped up to be the most important this time, with a close second of continuing to support the development of visitor experiences. So again, great to see these confirmations here, very helpful. And on this next slide, you can see these are really the top tactical planning and destination management strategies that expand the economic impact of tourism and ensure its vitality and sustainability. And so there's 9 options here, and these were ranked statewide. And you can see that the top choices that really came up were really managing tourism impact in order to preserve local assets and livability, identifying fostering partnerships to address economic resiliency, and building a diverse and equitable and inclusive tourism economy. So again, with this last poll here, please choose the top 3 statements that you believe are the top tactical planning and destination management priorities. And again, there's, and this one, actually, there is no other option. We will really just be ranking them. So please, again, just choose your top 3. Well, so you can see the ranking really stayed the same here. Managing tourism impacts in order to preserve your local assets and livability is really coming in strongly as the top choice. All right, again, so we will have these polling results available in the next couple of weeks. But again, thank you so much for doing all those rapid fire polls. And with this last question, it will hopefully be more really specific to hearing one location or, you know, product or experience that you have in your community that you really want to make sure is rebuilt over the next 2 years. So please include that in the chat. Again, just try to choose one and have it be specific. We will capture those comments. Now it is my pleasure to introduce Harry Dalgard, the Regional Cooperative Tourism Program Director. He'll be leading you through the regional specific planning focus of the rest for the remainder of the meeting with your regional partners. And Harry, kick it off, over to you.
Great. Hey, thanks, Staj. And thank you all again for joining us today. I think it's safe to say that working with regional stakeholders and getting an opportunity to really understand the regional needs and dynamics is what stokes us up on the work at Travel Oregon. You know, this is so much better when it's in person, but it's so awesome to see so many faces that I've met in the Mount Hood, Columbia River Gorge region over the years, and can't wait to be back in person and hear a little bit more about what's going on and what has gone on in the past year and change for all your different businesses and organizations. But before I hand it off to Lizzie, I just want to share with you some real quick context about the RCTP program. So as a general reminder, 20% of the statewide transient lodging tax that Travel Oregon receives is encumbered, and it's used to implement the Regional Cooperative Tourism Program. The RCTP program divides Oregon into 7 tourism regions, and we work directly with 7 regional destination management organizations on aligning on planning, programming, and developing opportunities with the travel and tourism industry. So next slide. I get that you're probably a little bit timeline weary at this point, so thanks, Staj. With that said, we've got another timeline here to share with you. This one is specifically the Regional Cooperative Tourism Program planning timeline. It's important to share with the group just so that everyone understands where our regional partners are in their plan development phase. So Staj has mentioned the statewide survey quite a few times, and then the corresponding survey reports that really have helped inform ideas to this point. And we're at that highlighted box right there, the regional stakeholder gathering or regional tourism engagement, where regions in Travel Oregon will be able to further hear from stakeholders about what's going on within the regions. We'll take what we hear today and then implement those suggestions into plans. Travel Oregon will approve those plans, and then the final real step in the process is a final piece of the feedback loop back to you as stakeholders to really understand what what got integrated in the plans and how you can best take advantage of the 21-23 plan now that it would be in place. So next slide, please. So additionally, I wanted to share some key programming adjustments that Travel Oregon made to ensure that RCTP was resilient through all the turbulent events of 2020. First of which was implementing emergency management guidelines. We developed a modified set of RCTP guidelines and just overall framework to ensure that the program was resilient enough to make it through COVID. But in doing so, we also structured those guidelines so that, you know, any future natural disasters, definitely a big knock on wood there, would be able to be incorporated into these guidelines. So we kind of had an opportunity to look at modeling this program in times of need. But basically what those guidelines revisions do, you'll see on the next slide, is increase the staffing administration ratio so that our RDMOs are secure through these turbulent times. And then also really focus the role on being responsive to the needs of the industry, businesses, and organizations across the state. Also, a key thing that we did this past year as a overall cohort of RDMOs and Travel Oregon, we completed a collaborative diversity, equity, inclusion training to just address overall considerations around racial inequity and racial justice, and really how they interface with the travel tourism industry, and how and where we can make investments to help remedy those considerations. And then lastly, I'll go into this a little bit more depth in future slide, but recently we also implemented a regional recovery and resiliency fund, and that's basically there to help RDMOs actualize programming that got put on the back burner due to uncertain times. So moving on. So you can see here on the screen the three different really operational funding structures that RCTP offers under, operates under. The top one is how a typical RCTP plan works. It has traditionally a little bit more diversified set of investments and disbursement, but under the emergency response guidelines, you can see the increased staffing administration ratios, and you know, the last pie chart that down there at the bottom really kind of illustrates what that dynamic looks like if regions operate a strategic investment fund or a regional grants fund. So next slide, please. So I also want to take a quick moment before I hand it over to Lizzie to just overall take a look at the budgets for RCTP. As you can see on the slide, the overall program funding dropped from fiscal year 21 to fiscal year 22. As mentioned earlier, RCTP is directly tied to transient lodging tax funding. So this drop was to be expected based on what we're seeing at the state level. So with that said, a delta between what was being forecasted in late spring of 2020 and the actual transient lodging tax led the need to revise some revenue forecasts. So at the February 21 meeting, the Oregon Tourism Commission approved a budget modification that will direct an additional $1.5 million of resource to the RDMOs via that Regional Recovery and Stability Fund that I mentioned earlier. This additional resource going to the region doesn't quite bring them up exactly to where they were in fiscal year 21, but it does help lessen the financial impact of the past year. So just a few key considerations about those resources or the regional recovery stability funds. One unique thing about these funds is that they can be used for in-state marketing. So that has not necessarily been a ability of RCTP resources due to state statutes. And then the regional recovery and stability funds can also be invested in things like direct investments and or regional grants programs. So to hear more about those opportunities and areas for funding, I'm going to hand it over to my colleague, Lizzie Keenan, and she'll walk you through some of the proposed plan items that the Mount Hood and Columbia River Gorge region is thinking about integrating into the next biennium. So take it away, Lizzie.
Awesome. Thank you, Harry. And thank you, everybody, for coming. I wish as I think Staj, Harry, and Teresa all mentioned, I wish we could see your faces, but in live in person, but soon enough, hopefully. So I'll probably take the next 20 minutes or so to talk through where we are with our draft plans. These are very much draft, as I think all know from wherever your business is. You've probably had many iterations of plans over the last 12 months, and I anticipate there to continue to be some tweaks as we go along. And before I get into where we are with our draft plan, I just wanted to kind of go through, as Harry mentioned, there was the stakeholder survey. So how we kind of got to where we are today was a combination of, we had 98 responses from our region in that stakeholder survey, which is what you saw a little bit of from Staj's presentation. There's also been lots and lots of Zoom meetings that I have been in over the past year with many of you on this call, talking about the needs and priorities of the region. And then finally, we took a lot of those inputs together with the 4 main DMOs in our region to go through a strategic planning process to get where we are, or what we're sharing with you today. And there are no polls with magical music in the background, but there will be a breakout session at the end of my presentation to get you guys creative and have more opportunity for feedback. So if you want to go to the next slide. So based on all of that stakeholder feedback, we landed on 5 key priorities for our region for this biennium. They are care for community, destination and visitor management, improve visitors' experiences, leverage resource through partnerships, and regional alignment. So I'm going to go through each of those one by one, talk about how we got there, what our goal is, and also give some insight into the tactics that we're thinking about for each of those. But first, if we can go to the next slide, I'll show you how our budget breaks out, as Harry was kind of talking about. So our CTP funds are collected on a calendar year, the year prior to the fiscal year that we use them. So in this coming year is when we're experiencing really the region's first hit financially from COVID. And so as you'll see, it is about I think it's like a 63% drop from the previous year. But if you look at this budget, because there were a lot of things that we couldn't spend on in the past 12 months, we do have just over $100,000 anticipated from this past biennium that we're going to be able to roll over into the next biennium. Adding on to, thankfully, that recovery and stability contribution that Harry mentioned from Travel Oregon, our biennial budget is going to be, we're going to be able to get to a point that's very similar to where we've been prior. So just over $300,000 each year broken out. So that's the good news. Hopefully, we'll be able to get tourism back to a more normal place over the next couple of years. So then moving into the 23-25 biennium, it'll be a little closer to normal without having to manage rollover and extra contributions. So if you want to go to the next slide. So as I mentioned, 5 different priorities. This first one is care for community. And so this kind of idea came to us in a few different ways. Stakeholders ranked getting help to advocate for effective policies and funding to support tourism businesses. They ranked that really high. There's been a lot of feedback from, over the year, or even, over many years, that some of our communities still kind of see tourism as other, and in some cases a villain, and not a part of the community. And, I think what we saw in a lot of our destination communities this year is really kind of a focus back in on the local community and who they are and how they can support each other. But what we need is to make sure that tourism is seen as a positive part of the recovery process for communities who have, been so focused on just keeping their own Main Street businesses alive, etc. So the idea for this work is that we would invest in understanding what some of those challenges are in community, find ways to better connect our community's identities to tourism so that it's not seen as something that takes away, but something that adds to the community, and just try to find a better balance there. So the goal is to create and/or support ways in which our communities can engage with, advocate for, and understand the benefits from the tourism economy. And one thing that I would mention is community is kind of a broad term. So that could be the community of lodging partners in the region. It could be the town of Estacada. So right now we're looking at, we have money set aside for research to figure out what it is our communities need in order to feel better about tourism coming back and being redeveloped in their area. We're looking at the possibility of a rare placement the first year to help us with that work. I know we've had a lot of success in our region, in the Gorge, with rare placements, and across the state in great community development work. So we think that's a good opportunity for us. And then we'll also have funds to then develop out what those needs are once we do some research. So just a few examples we have here is maybe it's advocacy training for businesses so they feel like they can better advocate for themselves, both with their legislators, local legislators, and then just within community, promoting local tourism stories in news, etc. So if you would like to go to the next slide, our next priority is destination and visitor management. I think, as we saw in the responses from that first section in the polls, everybody in this region is very aware of the challenges that we have in our well-developed region, and that requires a lot of destination and visitor management. So this has been a priority for us for many years, but just worded differently. But it's very clear that congestion is a concern, excessive trash is a concern. We have wildfire closures, which we saw in the chats as a major concern. There's still an imbalance of visitation between hotspot areas and lesser visited areas. And something that's really come out of the pandemic is, we've not seen a decrease in outdoor recreation use, but that outdoor recreation use is now not being reflected in economic spend in our Main Street businesses. And so that's been really hard. So the goal here is to leverage and support tools and programs that address high use, low use areas, seasonality, and economic impact needs in the region. So some of the tactics that we have proposed for this, one is a marketing or PR campaign that supports those goals, or that goal. And historically, our region does not really invest in big marketing or PR campaigns, but it definitely came through in the stakeholder survey that is a need, and something that I think we will need kind of when the region is ready to actively welcome people back. We want to make sure that they are welcomed back in the right way, and we can have the boost recovery in the best way possible. So no details on what that campaign might look like, but we do have funds set aside for that. We want to continue to leverage the Infinity Loop map, which is now our region's collateral piece. So that's what you see behind me. This was something that was built and finished, only a few months into the pandemic, so we have not had a chance to push it out a whole lot yet and promote it, but it is a map that shows the region as an Infinity Loop experience, and really a driving or car-free experience. And it promotes areas that are lesser visited, and it kind of downplays our high use areas. So you won't see waterfalls on this map other than Pup Creek Falls, which unfortunately is is closed at the moment, but hopefully will reopen soon. But like the waterfall corridor waterfalls are not highlighted, but some of our museums are highlighted on here. Our food trails and Fruit Loop are highlighted on here. So places that we know can take that visitor demand still. So our hope is to continue to leverage this tool to create some themed maps around it that might, fit specific needs we have, etc. We also set aside some funds for a natural disaster co-op with Travel Oregon, and that's something where if we put money into it and Travel Oregon does as well, if there is a fire, I think, which is probably going to be most common, or a landslide or something where a natural disaster hits, which our region is very unfortunately accustomed to now, we will have funds to respond quickly to that and support the communities that were hit the hardest from it. We also plan to continue to support the trail and river ambassador programs in our region. So those are volunteer programs that support good, positive use and good stewardship along the Clackamas River for river ambassadors, and the trails on Mount Hood and in the Gorge with trail ambassadors. And finally, if the search and rescue bill passes this year, depending on the timing of that, we do want to set aside funds to support that program, just because that is such a important need in our region, is funding for search and rescue. And if you're not familiar with what that is, it's a program to create search and rescue like cards that visitors can buy. So it's kind of like an insurance card, but the funds for it will go to support search and rescue groups throughout the state. So I think that's going to be great, and fingers crossed that will pass. So next slide, please. So then this priority is improve visitor experiences. So as you saw, again, in that stakeholder survey, there was a really strong response to support existing visitor experiences to become more COVID safe, more COVID friendly. We're already seeing a good chunk of that work being funded through Travel Oregon's recent Destination Ready program. So thank you, Travel Oregon, for that. And then also, again, as mentioned earlier, and we saw in the chat, there is need for DEI training and there's been a lot of conversations about welcomability and how welcoming is our region, both in terms of accessibility and then also customer service, from the customer service perspective. So the goal here is to access funding and partnerships to support stakeholders with improving existing visitors' experiences in the region. So the first tactic example we have is to fund a grant contract position that can work directly with our partners to help them access funding for visitor experience improvements. This is something that we've actually funded in the current year. Lori is our contractor. She started a couple weeks ago. She's already on the ground helping, I think, some of you on this call with Travel Oregon's current grant program, but we figured it was, with the funding that we have to work with, it was smarter to fund instead of our own grant program, to fund a person who can get a lot more money into the region than we might be able to do with just a direct investment from our funds. So looking forward to introducing Lori to all of you and other partners, and she'll be able to help write grants, identify grants for your ideas, etc. We're also looking to leverage Travel Oregon's partnership and fund some scholarships for partners in the region for DEI and welcomability training. So I put in the chat my email. I know some of you already mentioned you're interested in DEI training. We're probably going to go the route of scholarships for that. So there will be something to come on ways to apply, and we can support you with ideas. I know of a lot of programs that are being run in the States or through different tourism organizations that we can connect you to. There was another opportunity to leverage a Travel Oregon and Orla program to offer scholarships for Orla's new guest service gold safety training. So look for that, hopefully sometime this summer to be launched, and we'll have a number of scholarship opportunities for folks to take that training. Next slide, thank you. So then we've got leverage resource through partnerships. So, as we mentioned, now more than ever, tourism dollars have narrowed in. It's important for us to use our funds in ways that leverage the work of others to expand the impact that we can have in our region. So the goal is to expand the work the RDMO can accomplish to meet our goals through partnerships with Travel Oregon, other RDMOs in the state, DMOs, associations, and other stakeholders. So really, throughout our plan and tactics that I've mentioned already, a lot of those are in partnership with things that Travel Oregon will offer. So they either will match our investment in a program, or it's something that they're building that we can buy into. We're also going to be covering membership dues for the RDMO and the DMOs for some of those larger associations that really support our industry and we can access their tools and research from, like Orla, ODA, US Travel, etc. And then next slide for our final priority. Thank you. So the final one is regional alignment. So as we know, our region is small, but we are mighty. And I think the more that we can talk about both sides of our region as a whole visitor experience, the longer a visitor will stay here and not just come for one day. I think a lot of our day visitation, which thankfully we have had through COVID, is it's a day trip to Mount Hood, it's a day trip to the Gorge. But what's going to have the biggest economic impact in our region is an overnight trip in the Mount Hood and Columbia River Gorge region. And also we know from past visitor research that we've done is visitors see this as one region. If we've talked to visitors on Mount Hood who talk about their next stop being the Gorge, and then same vice versa. So really the goal is to maintain and support a strong sense of alignment between Mount Hood and the Columbia River Gorge in our visitor communications. And I already went through this, but one example is that infinity loop map is a great way to tie in that full experience of the region. We have a content contractor and he knows his priority is to really cover that full regional experience. We're also, it's something that we put into our PR messaging as well, again, to extend the message of a longer stay in our region and not just that day trip. So if you'd like to go to the next slide, those were our priorities, our goals, and a handful of our proposed tactics. Now you can see how they map out in terms of budget categories, of Travel Oregon's budget categories. We do have unallocated funds, and most of those are in the second year of the biennium for us, just wanting to be very flexible and not knowing what is to come, 12 months from now. We've got funding to be able to respond and move and shift things around so that we can be responsive and productive with our programming and leverage it the best way we can. And so the next slide. So now that the presentation part is over, this is where we bring you guys in to get a little bit more active. There's no funky background music. And by funky, I mean cool. But this is a time for you guys to get into some breakout rooms and get a little creative. I've got a fun activity to warm you up around the infinity loop map. And then there's an opportunity for you to provide feedback on what you just heard about our plan and let us know what we're missing, what sounds really good, anything else we should be thinking about. So the groups that we came up with based on who registered for this meeting today are lodging, agritourism, food and bev, kind of bulked into one, tour operators and transportation in one, arts, culture, and attractions in a group, and then land managers and stewardship groups in the last group. And then for anybody who is DMO or an RDMO or economic development and you're like, I don't see myself in any of these groups, this is open for you to jump into the group that makes most sense for you. So as an example, I know we've got Ithaca from Mount Hood Territory on the call. She works a lot with tour operators, so she might jump into the tour operator and transportation group. So the way these breakout groups work is there's a variety of ways you may see how to jump into your group. There may be a pop-up that you see right now that shows you the names of the groups. If so, click the one that makes sense for you. You can also check the bottom of your screen on the toolbar There may be a breakout rooms button. There may be mine, I see join a breakout room. That's something I can click at the bottom. You may see a more section that says join a breakout group. Alternatively, if you do not see anything that mentions breakout groups on your screen, stay where you are, use the chat function and say, I want to go to this group. And we've got the awesome tech people here who will serve you into your group. So once you get there, there'll be a facilitator to take you through the program. It'll be about 20, 25 minutes in there. There'll be a reminder of when to come back, and then we'll wrap things up back as a group. So we'll see you in there. Thanks, guys.
Thanks for that. Well, and especially a huge thank you to all of you for contributing to those work groups. And thanks for rolling the dice, Lizzie, with the Jamboard session. We had a pretty productive group, and look forward to seeing the rest of those Jamboards as they come back. But as we're wrapping up, we do have one additional opportunity to provide feedback. And since today's session is being recorded, you can pass the recording along to your colleagues and friends that weren't able to be here today. But via the feedback form link that's up in the chat, as well as on the screen, you can provide your input to Lizzie and team about their different departmental strategies and proposals for investments, and then just an additional place to provide input in terms of how the Mount Hood and Columbia River Gorge region chooses to actualize resources. So just as a quick exit, we strive really hard to make all planning processes within travel and tourism dynamic as interactive and available to input from stakeholders as possible. So really thank you all for taking the time today to provide this input, and I really can't wait until it's in person again. Really think you did an awesome job in the digital space, but fully recognize it's better in person, and look forward to seeing you all in the coming year. So on behalf of the Mount Hood and Columbia River Gorge Tourism Alliance and Travel Oregon, we wish you the best spring, and really thank you again for joining us today. Have a good rest of your day.